It wouldn't be Florida without bugs. Just for starters, Ford, I already told you this in the pre-interview, but I take a little bit of issue with the word best. Prefer favorite. Favorite would make it more specific, but best leaves it open to like anything. So I like best. I feel like this could be two sub-questions, best and favorite. But a couple that came to mind when I started taking some notes about places surfing had taken me where things happened, and it didn't really involve the waves, but the stuff that happened around the waves was this one time. Me and a couple of buddies were in Bocas del Toro in Panama, and we decided that it was going to be a good idea to go to this island that was uninhabited, where there was this long beach break and nobody ever surfed there, but there was waves there, and camp, not for one night, but for like 3 nights. I'm pretty sure we did. Maybe it was 2 and 3 days. But so we had the guy drop us off, and we basically did a beach landing with the surfboards all tied together, making a little raft so they could carry our cooler full of hot dogs and Coca-Cola and beer and rum and a camera bag and a dry bag with, I don't even know what else we took. And we landed all that and then set up a tarp on the beach and had this pretty epic camping mission on a beach we thought was uninhabited. Turns out it wasn't. It was actually a turtle watched beach in Panama. And so, which is actually lucky for us, because I think it was the second night, we ran out of Coca-Cola. We drank all the rum, which tastes, by the way, fantastic. If you have no other liquid to drink and you're dehydrated, that rum will taste wonderful coming in from a surf. And then we all fell asleep, and Chuck, actually, my buddy Chuck, actually not from here, from Central Florida, hatched, birthed, if you will, incubated, and then birthed a bunch of sea turtles under where he basically slept that night. And so the next morning, as we're waking up and wondering maybe we should get water because we're waiting on the ride, which isn't coming till later that afternoon. How are we going to make it all day without any water? There's no more Coca-Cola, there's no more rum, all the hot dogs are gone. Obviously the beer was gone within the first few minutes. And then this guy comes riding along on a horseback, and he's like, "You guys are not supposed to be here." And we're like, "Well, here we are." So he actually walked Chuck down there and filled up our gallon jug for us, and we survived to live another day, and the waves were super fun. But the whole experience was pretty epic for the three of us. And funny enough, that footage got deleted coming back, because we took video of the whole episode. It got deleted coming back through the Bocas del Toro airport, which at that time was quite rudimentary. I think this was like 2005 or 6. And the magnets and and it was lost. So when we got back to Florida and put it in the tape to show all our friends, there was nothing there. There was one other one too. It involves my brother. But before I go on to that one, the question of best surf memory not wave of all time. When you've lived a life that is somewhat rooted around surfing, that's a super hard thing to pick, because there's so many ebbs and flows in your life where you've got all these memory pockets, and so there's a lot of good stuff there. A lot of it's tied to certain places or certain people or certain songs you hear, like just anything. This one time, my wife had to go work in Australia on the Gold Coast, which I, being the opportunistic surfer and obviously selfish if I'm a surfer, because we all are and we all know that, I was like, "Well, babe, you got to take me because I got to watch the kid, and the kid can't go without you, and you can't go without the kid, so we all got to go. We got to go." She actually had to work on the Great Barrier Reef, which is actually a totally different non-surf story, although surf related. That probably would have been a better story for this. That's when I proposed to her. Have I ever told you that story?
No, I haven't heard that.
Let me get through this one. So then we were going to Australia. We were going to land in the Gold Coast, and then we were going to drive about 10 hours up the coast, 10 to 12 hours, spread out over 2 or 3 days because we had a 1-year-old, and pick up a ferry to go out to the Barrier Reef, one of the very first islands to the south in the Barrier Reef, where there's a research station for coral reef ecology. My wife is a PhD marine biologist. Her emphasis was coral reef ecology. So she was going there to do a symposium and a presentation and all this other stuff. So anyways, we were gonna go over there, and then my brother decided to join me, and his now wife, then girlfriend, longtime girlfriend though, so I mean they were basically a pair. And so we all go over there, and in the process of moving up the coast one day, I had sort of picked a few places where I thought there'd be waves, and we were staying at hostels. So we were staying at this one place, and we wake up the next morning, and I'm like, I think we can walk around the corner, and there's some waves. And so we took the boards, and we walk around the corner. Then we walk past this beautiful bay where there's this right coming in, and I'm like, man, Chase, that looks rad. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, but that's not the surf spot. The surf spot's on the other side of the headland. So we go up over the hill to the headland, and there was a surf spot with a bunch of people at it. And it was just wonky kind of lefts and rights in between these two sort of rock outcroppings. And I'm like, hey man, let's go back to that wave where there was no people. He's like, duh. So we walk back over the hill, and we go down to the beach there, and we paddle out and go surfing. And we just had the best time. I mean, it wasn't great waves, but it was pretty dang fun for a couple of Gulf Coast boys. 3 to 4 foot, perfectly blue water. Just wonderful, little rights, nothing crazy, but fun. And so we get done, and we get out, and we're walking up the beach, and getting back to the road. I think we had to go back to the hostel to get the women and the child. And this person's like coming off of the cliff, kind of meets us, and they're like, hey, you boys surfing out there, And we're like, yeah, it was cool. And they're like, why nobody surfs here? And we're like, nah. He's like, there's no shock nets out there. And we're like, okay, well, didn't matter today. Thanks. So that was one I thought of that was pretty funny. But the other one with my wife, which is a non-surf memory, but obviously same trip. And part of the reason my brother and his girlfriend at the time came was because they knew this was going to go down. I'd already kind of worked this out back here at home before we left and went on the trip. And so I flew over this little steel plate, which is mounted in my house right now, but it says, will you marry me? It's cut out in the plate. And it fit perfectly in the BC pocket in the weight pocket of a BC, a dive BC, which we took dive gear on that trip too. And so we get all the way over to this research station out on this remote island of the Barrier Reef, which I'd already Google Earthed the crap out of. And although there was nothing that said there was waves there, I was like, there has to be waves there because of where it is. And there was internet trail of waves to the atoll just to the south of it. I'm like, there must be waves there. So we take our boards over on the ferry, and we get off at the research station / the island was only big enough to have a research station and a resort, an eco resort. And so we get off, and we have to stay at the eco resort because they wouldn't let us stay at the research station because we had a child at the time, which is a whole nother story because my wife got money back for it because they totally kind of hosed us on that. But so we go over to the eco resort while all the rest of the scientists are going to the research station and staying for pennies, and we're staying for hundreds. Anyways, we go into the resort, and the first place I stop is the boat rental snorkel station. And I'm like, hey, of course I'd already looked at the marine forecast, and there was a swell coming in a few days later, and I'm like, yes. I go in there and I'm like, hey, I'd like to rent a boat, take me out there and go surfing right out there on that reef somewhere. And they're like, nah, mate, you can't surf on the reef. You skeg, you see, you skeg. your skeg will hit the coral and that's bad for the coral. And I was like, look, bro, if my skeg's hitting the coral, I'm in a much worse place than worrying about the ecosystem. All right, if I do that, you can sue me. And they were like, sorry, mate, we can't do that. You can't rent a boat and go out there and do that. And I'm like, okay, you're right. How about I rent a boat to go snorkeling for 4 hours right out there? Can we do that? He's like, no, mate, you can't rent a boat and snorkel out there. That's where the waves break. And I'm like, I thought we were in Australia. Like, oh, good day, mate. Do whatever you want. Great outdoors. That kind of crap. No, none of that. So I give up, right? And I go about my week there at the resort with my wife. She's working all week. Me and my brother and his girlfriend are taking care of my at that time, 1-year-old, and lounging by the pool, doing some snorkeling, reef walking, all the kind of things you do on an atoll. And but then it was time to do the pop the question setup, right? And here's where it gets dicey. So I had already Google Earth the crap out of this place. So I knew the layout, I knew everything about it. And it had this blasted channel in the coral for the boats to come in. Then they had sank like an old tanker or freighter or something as a reef break to keep the coral from growing back into the channel that they had blasted, right? So you basically, right offshore, had this huge, large steel structure that was just sitting in the reef at some depth, which I didn't know till I got there what depth it would be at. But in my little pea brain, I had imagined, I'm gonna take this steel plate out there and I'm gonna snorkel around and I'm gonna find that freighter and I'm gonna find a spot on the freighter I can get back to, and I'm gonna put this thing down in the sand, and then I'm gonna go back to the beach, and then I'm gonna get my wife-to-be, hopefully, and swim her out there acting like we're going on some eco snorkeling adventure that I've whizzed up in my mind, and show her the plate and propose to her with this O-ring I got out of a dive scuba bottle, right? True story. And my brother was in on it, so he was supposed to watch the kid on the beach while I took wife-to-be out snorkeling, right? Okay, so all that happens. I staged it, I found a place, found a depth, great snorkel depth. It was only like 15 or 20 feet. You get down to it easy, you know, and super clear water. I had the plate staged in there, a little sand over it for effect. And so we're waiting on at this point, we are sitting on the beach, just waiting for my wife to show up for this appointment we've set up with her when she's got a break in her work day to come do this snorkel with me, her at that time just baby daddy. And so we're sitting there, and here come two dudes out of the resort sand dune with like surfboards and boogie boards, and they're just loading up one of the boats with surfboards. And of course, I'm sitting here waiting for my, soon wife-to-be, fiance, hopefully. And she's gonna be here in like 5-10 minutes. And these guys are like throwing boards and I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh mate, swells, Richter, just rolling so good. Deep period, all around the reef. And I'm like, they told me I couldn't go do that. And they're like, oh mate, they just tell everybody that. You can't, it's fine. You wanna go? You wanna jump in right now? And I'm like, and I had to say no. I was like, dudes, you've asked me at the worst time in my life ever. I can't say no right now. I mean, I have to say no. I can't say yes right now.
That's true love.
And yeah. And so I got to watch those guys just take off right around the reef. I knew where we were going because I've been looking at it all week. I mean, it was a super small atoll. You could see where the waves were good. And anyways, here comes my, wife-to-be, and we go do the snorkel, and everything panned out great, and she said yes. And
that's so cool. The little plate didn't shift at all. You knew where it was. You found it.
It was like 1/4-inch steel, so it's pretty heavy.
Okay. Cool.
And so that was the point. I had to find a place I could get back to, right? So I had already like Google Earth the whole thing and looked for places in the reef that I was like, okay, I can definitely find that. Right. And that freighter was convenient. But so then that night, of course, there was nothing to do on the atoll except go to the happy hour at the resort every single day. And so, of course, at the happy hour, who strolls in? Oh, mate, so good. Oh, you should have been there. It was so painful. So painful. But it turned out great, actually, because, at that point in time, I sort of had to trade. I had to figure out what was important really quick. But, you miss a few waves here and there for stuff, so that's a non-wave memory right there that probably will live forever, in my mind, as long as I live. Maybe in my wife's too. She might not outlive me. She worries a lot. I would have to say it was me and Jared's trip to Indo. That was a trip of a lifetime for sure. That was, this is supposed to be non-wave memory, right?
Yeah. Did you see any cool monkeys over there?
Yeah, the monkeys were insane. It was a beautiful part of the world to see. I've never been to Indochina, actually. That was my first foray into it. That was the first time I'd ridden a scooter for more than 15 or 20 seconds at a time, and that would be it. Me and Jared travel pretty good together. We're like the odd couple. I'm trying to plan things, and he's like, donuts, let's go there now. Okay, that's what we do. Go get some donuts. Is that question 3, or are you going?
No, I'm just going off script.
2 alpha. All right. Best wave. By the way, I hate picking singular items with
top 3.
With the euphemism best.
Right. So you can take top 3 best and favorite and weirdest.
I just tend to link locations and periods. Like there was this place and I had a bunch of really awesome waves there. But my favorite wave was HT's, Lance is right, and it's a famous, very popular, made popular on Instagram and all the other places. But that was probably my favorite, although I had some good sessions at other places too. They were super fun. And best singular wave was probably the wave I realized I was holding my breath in the tube at HT's, and I should start breathing in the tube, and it would make things seem more normal and less stressful. And after that, I was like, oh, cool, we can exist in here for a couple seconds at a time, maybe longer, if possible. But
so you don't get as much opportunity to worry about that in Panama City Beach with our tubes?
No, I can totally hold my breath pretty much through an entire wave. And a paddle out. Whoo! Oh, this one I'm going to have to meander a little bit. But there was this one wave at the island one morning early. It was a long period groundswell out of the Yucatan Basin from a system that was down there. So it was like 10-second swell, maybe. And me and my brother went over there first thing in the morning. We were the only people surfing. And I got this one wave. And I dropped in, and it had like 2 sections on it. And I pulled into the first section. I see the second section already like throwing. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, but there's nobody around, it's kind of like, anyways, I ended up making both sections and a little bonus at the end. And I come squirting out, and this is like, summertime, late summer, so 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning is broad daylight. And I come squirting out, and I'm just like, I think that might have been one of the best waves I've ever surfed here in this super terrible place I live to surf. And I come out, and at this point I was kind of far down the beach too, and I just kind of belly boarded it in. I get out, and I'm kind of psyched. I had to go to work too, so we had gotten there super early, and I needed to leave the island by like 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So it was gonna be like a 2 or 3 hour job, and then go home, go to work, and be normal for the rest of the day. And I get up on the beach, and I'm running back towards the rocks, because I was thinking I could probably jump in and get another roundabout. And there's one of the wildlife rangers on his little four-wheeler waiting right there on the top. And I'm like, and I'm all excited, but I didn't think he saw it, and I'm just running around like happiest guy in the world, but nobody saw it, so it's really all in my own mind. So I'm, trying to not be a weirdo on the beach running around. And he's like, I said, hey man, what's up? And he said, I've never seen anybody stay in the tube that long here. And I was like, dude, I can't believe you saw that. Like, he was like, I didn't think I was seeing it. He was like, I saw the wave breaking, and I didn't know you were in there. And then you came out the end. And that's when I was like, holy cow. And I'm like, awesome, man. That means this memory lives in two places now, yours and mine. And it basically told me that it wasn't a fantasy.
Right.
Like, because sometimes I'm pretty sure around here we pretend that we are way deeper than we are.
Right, yeah.
And the waves are way bigger than they are. And so, for that and that dude on the four-wheeler that one morning, God love him. Thanks for telling me.
Tell us about that wave that Tupac got the picture of.
Oh, yeah. But, like, Mex Beach, on any given day you show up over there and you can get the craziest, weirdest, brownest, deepest, darkest cave tube and come out if you're regular foot. Although there's some lefts. I don't know why you would go left, but there are. And but that place is obviously super magical too. And the old timers used to tell me about that spot. And then I remember the first time I went there by myself, and I pulled up at the pier and looked at it, and I was like, I can't believe the water's so brown, but the waves look rad, because it's barreling and spitting down the beach, and just all these rights running down. And then I seen, they had told me about El Governor, so I went down there and checked that, and it gets bigger from the pier to El Governor. That's local knowledge. There you go. And depends on the swell. But I went down there, and that was the first time I ever surfed it. And I had one of those instant cameras. Remember back in the day, you had the instant waterproof ones. You have to go turn it in at CVS, and it would come back 5 days later, and pictures would be terrible, pretty much. All of them. You might have one fuzzy picture of the waves that looks decent. I remember clicking off a few of those pictures, and ever since then, basically, I'll go over there by myself any day because it's worth it.
Right.
Pretty much 9 out of 10 times. There will be the occasional whoops, but it's a nice drive anyways.
Well, you do have to pay your dues to the wave every now and then.
Yeah.
And thanks.
Yeah, it's not free, for sure.
So tell us about that Tupac wave.
That one I went over there by myself one day after work. That was a Ike swell. We had a bunch of waves for a bunch of days in a row, and I think that one, the waves were big, and I think either I was at work and I didn't have enough time to go to the normal spot, our favorite spot, the best spot here, when there's an actual wave on it and there's not a gajillion people, which is probably never possible. Welcome to old age. And I think I only had time to run over there. And so I just squirted over there in the afternoon after I got off work at 4. And there was a lot of people scattered along the beach, photographers and all kinds of, and it was sick. It was really good. Hurricane swell. And the wind was sort of southeast still. So it was sort of side shore blowing up into the rights so that they were sort of offshore and not too hard as to make it have a cross in it. And just jumped in and was paddling around surfing, catch as many waves as I could, because I got off work and was pissed off at everybody else that was been surfing all day. Obviously haters. Maybe I was a hater, but just chasing a bunch of waves around, and somehow I ended up in just the right spot for that wave. And I remember being far away from a couple packs of dudes, kind of I could see it coming, and I was looking around and I'm like, I guess I'm not going to take the first one. I'm gonna wait because it appears that there's a larger one behind this one. And then that one swelled up, and it was it's everything you could ever ask for in Mexico Beach, pull in and hope you make it. And when I jumped off the back, there was a guy like 50 yards down the beach that was like, and I'm like, ah, cool, it must have been pretty good, and I didn't know that Two-Pat had gotten pictures of it until I got out like an hour later. What it was where I was surfing that one little peak, his group of dudes from New Smyrna were just probably 50 yards away they were the group to the direct right of me. And so he thought I was one of them that had moved over. And so that is the only reason he opened the aperture and pulled the trigger to take my pictures and then charged me dearly for them, which was totally worth it. But, that's what happened on that one. And I think that it helped that year, too. I'd done a couple trips I'd done a trip to Puerto Rico that year.
Where'd you surf in Puerto Rico?
Like West Coast, North Coast, like middles. Every time I've been there, I sort of stay right at the corner, so I can go north or west. But I just say that to say that I think I'd had a good trip to Puerto Rico that spring, so that the confidence level was still there at a sizable drop wave, pitch sort of opportunity, so that it wasn't a total. I pulled in instead of straightening out and like, oh, I'm not gonna make this, and because sometimes if it's been a super long time and you drop in on a bomb and you're kind of like, who knows, and you straighten out and you're like, God, I'm terrible, but you get to try again. That's the great part, if you can make it back out. Favorite break you've surfed globally? Oh, I wrote some notes here.
Okay.
I took a trip to Tobago one time.
Where's that?
Trinidad and Tobago.
Oh.
It's the last two islands before you get to South America and the Windward Chain in the Caribbean. And my buddy Chuck, who I've traveled with a ton, he was featured prominently in the story about best non-surf memory when we camped in Bocas on Bastimentos and hatched some sea turtles. But he took me to Trinidad and Tobago where he had a bunch of friends, and we surfed a spot in Tobago that was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable too because I had just had LASIK surgery on my eyeballs right before I went on that trip. So up to that point, and I think I was 25 at that point, but up to that point I had been surfing with contacts forever. Every day of my life I'd ever surfed, I had contact lenses in my eyeballs, and I'd learned that so I always kept a spare in my board shorts, and I'd learned what conditions it was more likely for my contact lens to come out of my eyeball. And I literally had dozens of waves where I'd be surfing along on the wave and the spray, it was when offshore winds were blowing and spray's coming back up at you, and the spray would hit my eyeballs and would knock my contact out, and I would grab it on the wave, put it in my mouth, finish out surfing the wave, kick out, paddle all the way back out to the outside, put the contact back into my eye, out of my mouth, and then finish out surfing, and then I hadn't burned my spare in case it totally went away, right? So the trip to Tobago came right after I got LASIK and did not have to have any sort of contact lens in my eye, and it was a reef break, and I remember every paddle out, back out on that wave, I would basically put my face in the water and open my eyes to look at the reef below me while I'm paddling, because prior to that, when you have contacts, you can't open your eyes underwater. They'll come out if you hold them open for very long. So that was one of my best, and that wave is sort of not a high profile wave, and it was really awesome to be able to surf it really good conditions, and not without some discerning locals, obviously. But that's one of my favorite. Super blue Caribbean water, sailboats floating out in the harbor, and you're surfing this wave, peeling right in over coral reef, right up to the beach where there's reggae band with the little steel drums. It was idyllic, I guess would be the word for it. Oh wait, Punta Roca. You can't forget that one. If we're talking fave waves globally, Punta Roca in El Salvador. Definitely one of my faves. It's the J-Bay of Central America. That wave is super awesome. Been to El Salvador a bunch of times, and I usually stay at a point that's outside of town, but when the swell actually comes in, you go to Punta Roca because it is serious and fun. It's super good. It's a kind of a barreling cobblestone, right, that goes for a couple hundred yards. I mean, they have a contest there, so I'm sure you've seen it on the interwebs. I actually have a picture of the famous guy from El Salvador burning me on a wave at Punta Roca, and he burns me and I'm riding behind him, and then I go up to do a turn because I'm like, well, if he's just going to ride out there, I'm just going to surf the wave. And I go up and do a turn, and the picture is this local dude with sponsor stickers. I forget who he was riding for, but he's standing there, turning around looking at me, and I'm tapping the lip a little bit there right behind him, and it was pretty egregious. And that's one of my favorite pics. I don't know where it is right now, somewhere on a hard drive, but Punta Roca would register highly for a global favorite of mine, but I'm a regular foot, so that's how it falls out. J-Bay's too far away for now. We were talking about it earlier. We didn't cover every spot. There's so many spots here that they only break every once in a while, and to be there, and they break so infrequently that to develop any sort of history or plot or statistical record of how they are with tide or current or storm surge or direction or period, it just takes forever because they never break that much. And so there's a lot of waves like that. I like Justin's idea with the helicopter. That'd be fast, but I'd be happy with a boat. Could probably take a bigger cooler on a boat, but I think there's spots. If I had to pick a famous spot, I'd say I've probably never surfed to the west of here, outside of East Pass. There's that HT's place. I think it's called HT's too. It's the big sandbar that's outside of East Pass. Outside of it. It's basically their ebb shoal outside of their pass. I've never surfed that, but it looks like it could be good on a hurricane swell. Points to the east of here, I feel like, are probably holding, but you got to be there at the right tide and right wind for sure. And timing all that super hard. I've done a couple and I've seen some potential, but everybody likes to surf somewhere without people. That's what we all dream about. Nobody dreams about surfing with a million people. So my dream strike mission would be finding a place without a million people when there's good waves here. Me and my man Jared just did our dream international strike mission for the time being, which was the Indo trip for 4 weeks, where we spent a lot of time at Bali, at Ulu, and then almost 2 weeks in the Mentawai. But after that, on my bucket list is probably J-Bay, and then Honolulu Bay in Maui, and then probably back to the Indian Ocean, because those were probably the best waves I've ever seen. And I think there's probably a lot more islands you could go explore up there. Maybe with less people, probably not. But yeah, so that would be mine. I think for right now, that's a moving target. You know, that's going to change with the wind. But for now, I'd say probably J-Bay's next on the list. I would say the maneuver I'm working on now super hard is staying in the game as much as possible and probably balancing life in general because I love surfing. It's always been a part of my life since I started. It always will be a part of my life as long as I can do it. But as you get older, sometimes other things start to dominate. Sometimes there are things you don't want, sometimes there are things you do want. The physical stresses of getting older definitely start to weigh in sometimes, whether you like it or not, despite a disciplined regimen. Even heredity can take over sometimes and tell you that things are going to be a different way. So right now, staying in the game and trying to keep my surfing away from like a you know, you don't want, at this point I have a family and stuff, so you don't want surfing to interfere with stuff that you're never going to get to do again, like time with your family, time with your kids. So a lot of times there is a negotiation with yourself as to whether the waves that finally show up here after 4 weeks of flatness that are only waist high and blown out, if that's worth missing something super critical with your kids. And so that's the maneuver I work on nowadays. If I could pull any maneuver, it would not be on a wave. It would be to find a piece of property where I could surf a large part of the year, decent waves, and move there and live there most of the year. That's my dream maneuver. As far as riding waves, maybe it's because I'm older, but at this point in time, I don't really care what I do on a wave. As long as I make the wave, I really enjoy the wave. I really enjoy the waves. The differences in them, they're always different. They always throw you something different. So at this point, just handling the wave and surfing them well and riding the wave and trying to use the best places in the wave. And, you know, I don't care about, I just care about making the wave. Everybody loves a good tube, so you can't beat that. But at this point, my dream maneuver would be finding a little plot of land with a wave on it. That could be private property. Yeah, right, never. But, or within walking distance where I could go surf for the rest of my days. That would be my dream maneuver. You know, I've thought about this one for a while, and I really can't think of a person, a singular person for as a whole person that I would want to sit with me and go over my surfing with me. As a Floridian, I feel like, you know, we're compelled to say another Floridian who's a professional, of which there's many to choose from, and any one of them would be great. But I'd probably want somebody who's probably my age and maybe has dealt with some of the things that I have dealt with, will deal with, continue to deal with, just so that you can know that you can do it. And, you know, sometimes you get to a place where you think physically, if you've hurt yourself or whatever, like you might think like you know, at this age, you start to think like there may be no surfing again ever when you hurt yourself pretty bad. And, you know, especially when you look around at the guys that still surf that are our age and older, they're pretty few, and the ages and the numbers of those guys gets fewer, and girls gets fewer as the ages go up. And so you just realize that like it is definitely it's a young person's game for a lot of different reasons. And so I don't think I have a mentor that I would want to sit with me. I couldn't pick one. I've been thinking forever. I could name some pro person, and they'd be beneficial for a little while. And maybe I'd make good friends with them, but who knows?
Would you rather just like, you know, have your like a group like Chuck and maybe some other guys, like dream trip?
Yeah, of course, any day. But if I had to pick somebody to sit at some waves with me forever, I think I'd probably pick my brother. Well, I told you this before, but I guess that was off the record. So now we got to go on the record. I think you should chase down Ryan Ivey and probably Carl Allen. Get some of those guys. Dale Barth. Those are the guys that, when I was sucking at surfing. Where's my kid? What's the dog in the pen? When I was coming up and just learning to surf and trying to figure stuff out, those guys were, they already had it figured out. So those are the guys that we were looking up to, Tate, and I'm sure there's other guys that I can't even remember. There's guys that aren't alive anymore, like Chris Broadhurst and like Chuck Wadsworth, but guys that just they were out there doing it, and so we were trying to be like them and take cues off of them. And surfing to me has just been, as far as a meaning, everybody's got to have something, right? I guess not everybody, but to me, surfing represented a way in this coastal town to have something to do all the time. That well, I was wrong about the all the time thing, obviously, but I don't regret it one bit. It's I've tried to make it as much a part of my life as I could, and as you go through different phases of your life, that volume has to change sometimes, and so I've tried to keep it there. It's always my go-to. It's always my place to go to, because it has literally no value except that you're not getting food out of it. You're not harvesting food. You could sort of say you're staying physically fit, except that here we do it so little that you basically only work out like once a month if you consider surfing your workout. So that doesn't really stick. But so it really has no value except that it brings joy to some people that enjoy it, and I guess I'm one of those people. I think I'll enjoy it for the rest of my life. Probably never stop doing it until I can't do it anymore. And then I may, just suck it up and bodyboard or something just to annoy everybody. I might like crowds at that point too, come to think of it. I mean, how fun would it be to be on a bodyboard in a big crowd of people? Like, I get it. That looks fun. But I think surfing brings something positive, and it did that for me. It's done that for me. It's been a part of my life, a huge part of my life for the whole life, except for the part before I was 12 years old. But it's a funny thing. It'll take you places. It'll get you into stuff. And it is what you make it. And it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be this weird, aggressive thing you do where you want to be super competitive at it. It can be this thing where you just enjoy being out there. But what it really is you harnessing this one piece of energy that's come from super far away, from forces that are larger than us, that we can't control and we can just barely even predict. And just for that little span of time, you get to harness that energy and ride along. And it's free, sort of, but it's free energy, and you do with it what you want. It's different every time, hardly ever the same. I'd say never the same unless you're in the wave pool, but it's a beautiful thing.